I was tempted with the hour change to talk about prayer just to let you guys have 30 minutes of quiet time just to pray, but I figured if we did that, somebody might fall asleep, so I'm not going to do that for you. I'm sorry. You'll have to get your Wesleyan hour somewhere else. But this morning, I'm so excited. I've just been having holy goosebumps and holy shakes this morning. I'm just feeling the Spirit this morning. I'm really thankful for our worship team leading us into God's presence this morning. As we are continuing on in this series, what we're calling Revolution. I know it's something that can kind of get a little bit fuzzy of what that looks like and what does it mean to be a revolutionary, especially in our day and age where we talk about rebellions, and it can kind of get a little bit political sometimes. But again, we're not here to disrupt any sort of systems in place, but it's really to have an indwelling of what it looks like to be revolution in the way that we live our faith with God. And so before I get into this, I'm just going to go ahead and pray one more time. If you would just bow your heads with me. Father God, we're so thankful to you this morning. Lord, we thank you again for your Spirit here with us this morning. Lord, we believe that you have a powerful word in store for all of us today, Lord, myself included. Lord, you just use me in these moments just to speak your word truthfully and honestly. And God, that we would leave this place different than when we came in. God, I just thank you for everyone in this room. I'll be with us now in these next few moments. In your name, amen. Kind of just as an opening story, I guess, of the person that we're looking at that was kind of this revolutionary leader, if you will, is named by Jeremy Lanphier. Jeremiah, but he went by Jeremy according to his friends. In 1857, in July of that year, America was in a place where they were really, really struggling politically, economically, and even just spiritually. There was a huge decline in Christians attending churches. And Jeremy Lanphier was a member of a Dutch Reformed church in New York City. And he had a very well-known position as a very passionate person for daily time with the Lord. And he just had a very good charisma about him. He was a very smart businessman, very sharp, young guy. But he had been approached by his pastor. And with some of the political unrest, they were having these laws that were forcing some of their members of the congregation out of the country. They were being deported. And so with that, his pastor approached Jeremy and said, Jeremy, I just need you to do something. I don't know what you got in store. I don't know what you're thinking, but I need you to do something. And so he was appointed to be a missionary, if you will, in downtown Manhattan. And he began passing out flyers just for a simple prayer meeting. And so he got ready, I think by September 23rd, 1857, he'd been passing out these flyers. And as he was kind of getting some people, he felt like it was going to be good. Well, he shows up on that first day, and only 6 people show up, right? It's not exactly this huge prayer moment that he was expecting. But yet, he continued, and they continued to pray. And months later, by the 3rd week, they had 40 people. But then even more after that, more people came. And within months, there were 10,000 people a day, just in New York City alone. And they got so full to the point where they had to meet every single day. What started just this little one-room hall that they were renting one day a week, they ended up having rent every single day, and they relocated to another site that was bigger that could afford more people to stay together that way. And this entire movement spread throughout Chicago, to Louisville, to Cleveland, St. Louis. And again, within those few months, 50,000 of New York's 800,000 at the time were new converts just for Christ. And it's estimated that all over America, over 2 million people of the 30 million in America at the time were brand new Christians. And this movement that took place, it did not just stay in America. There were people that came, businessmen that came, and it spread all the way throughout Ireland and Scotland and Wales, England, South Africa, India, Australia, and even into the Pacific Islands. But again, if we were just looking at Lanphier's first trial, we'd have said, 6 people, is that really impacting God's kingdom, right? Is that worth continuing to do? But again, he was faithful and he stuck with it. And so we see that this movement took fire and it began spreading throughout the entire world. While the culture of Lanphier's time is very different from our own, the need for spiritual awakening is just the same, amen? I look around in our churches, I look around even our own community here in Lyman and Duncan area, and it's crazy. Yeah. We see drug addicts, we see people on the streets, we see homeless people, we see broken marriages, we see sex addicts, we see all sorts of people that just need a big helping of Jesus, right? The average church attendance in America today is 78. If you can believe that. But it keeps declining at a rate that scares me. Quite honestly, it scares me. All around our world, we see mass shootings on a regular basis. There are more racial tensions than ever before, and they're boiling even in our own backyard here in the Carolinas. The news and threats of terrorism instill more fear and anxiety than I think any other time in our nation's history. There's political division. Our phones and social media are constantly bombarding us with bad news 24/7, 365 days a year. There are more church splits, we have struggles, we have brokenness and concerns in our own personal lives. And yet, God expects us to pray, right? Is there really something that's worth praying for? Is it really powerful? Is it really worth doing? I tell you all this not because I want to depress you this morning. I tell you all that because I want you to know that I believe in a God that is seeking us out and also seeking out all those broken situations. All the things around our world, around our community that we don't see hope in. God sees this opportunity to redeem, to reconcile for His purposes. I think Psalm 35 says it best. It says, "While weeping may stay for the night, rejoicing comes in the morning." You may have heard it said as well that the night is always darkest right before the dawn. Our world is actively disregarding and looking past the church because we failed to give them answers for difficult questions. And if I'm very honest with you, even just from my personal heart, too often I would rather have theological conversations within people in this room than go out and invite people out there, right? Because it's safe in here, but out there it's dangerous. It's wild, it's untamed. But in here I have control. In here we have safety, we have comfort in each other. And while that's good, we're called to be out there. Too often we pretend to not see the homeless, the drug addicts, the immigrants, the foreigners, the widows, the Republicans, the Democrats, the jerks and the jerkettes. We grieve our hearts. We grieve our Lord's heart every single time. And so in a world where you're expected to subscribe to one way or another, I want to present another way, a middle way, if you will. This is actually going to require a little bit of participation with you, but I want you to turn to your neighbor and I want you to say, "Stay true." Stay true. For those of you that might be a little better, you can say, "Stay gold, honey boy." Maybe that's a little bit better, more of your style. You can stay gold, okay? But I think Lanphier held on to something that nobody else had seen at the time. All the despair and all the craziness in our society all stemmed from a spiritual climate, right? Matthew 15, again, I apologize, won't be on the screen, but Jesus talks about the things that come out from our mouths, the things that we do in our lives, they come from our heart, right? All of the actions, they are bubbling up somewhere inside, and what just spills out is just because of whatever's going on in our heart. So we look at our lives. Does our marriage stink? It might be because of our heart. Do our finances, do we have the wrong attitude about them? It might be because of our heart. In all of those stinking circumstances, trying to fix them won't work if I don't address the real, under-the-table issues in my own heart. And so again, Lanphier's conviction was that if people could realign their hearts with God, their circumstances no longer have the power to crush their hearts and lives. And so in the same way, when the church has issues, I believe it's really related to heart issues. It's not about behavior modification, it's about our heart. And so the church's conviction should be the same, to lead with a prayerful heart that seeks God and seeks people who are thirsty and hungry for more. But again, how does all this really translate to today? I think we would all agree that we know that prayer is important. We would say we have a positive view of prayer. But have we ever really been taught how to pray? And there are obviously a few times in Scripture we see very explicit examples of that, and we'll get to that later. But I think even more so, there's kind of the heart behind prayer. Again, why do we pray? And so I'm one of those people, I have to admit, I'm very much a act first, ask later. And so that's kind of getting me in trouble sometimes. Even just this week, Kylie had somehow just lost one of her house keys. And so I'm visiting out with a friend and I realize I forgot to leave my key. But in those moments, is prayer going to do anything for me, right? If I just pray that God would somehow imagine or would allow my keys to show up in her pocket, that's not going to do any good, right? And so it kind of led me to this idea that prayer without action is bad, and action without prayer is worse. Prayer without action is bad, and action without prayer is worse. You see, throughout the Old Testament and New Testament, we see all sorts of signs and wonders from God, but all of them were predicated by a prayer or a blessing. When Moses parted the Red Sea, he consulted God first. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he prayed over the fish and bread first. When Paul and Silas were thrown into prison, they prayed and sang songs to God before the earthquake broke them free. And so in preparing for this week, I struggled to nail down what really shows us the heart of prayer. What shows us this kind of idea that we can be in constant communion with God in such a way that our prayer would not just simply be words floating up to a ceiling, but they would actually be powerful to instill our hearts and to change us from the inside out, and also allow us to love people well. And so I narrowed it down to two. And the first one is Psalm 23. Some of the translations might be a little bit different than what you're used to, but I'm reading from the NIV here, and so it's going to be on the screen if you can read along with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, often we hear that at funerals, and I promise you today is not a funeral. I hope today is a day where we can all be a little bit more reawoken to the power of prayer. And so, as we are looking into this, I want to break it down for you. I know this is not specifically a prayer, but I do believe that these words were prayerfully inspired to David. And so I want to break down just simply verse by verse, and I think there are 5 values that will elevate our prayer as a practice. And so right there, starting in verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. That really points to me of what I would call divine dependence. Again, some of these, I wish they could go in order of A, B, C, D, E, but it really bugged me. I tried my best to make it work. But divine dependence for verse 1. And so acknowledge that you need God. Simply acknowledge that you need God. David led with the truth. If anybody could lead him to a fulfilled, purpose-driven life, it would be God. And so the same is true for you and for me. When we open our prayers with a desire or a declaration to see God as our best friend, or as our leader, as our guide, we are doing what David did here. And so in verse 2, what I would call abounding hope. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Especially today, where we've seen so much rain, I'd love to see just a quiet day where still waters are going. But we've all heard the phrase, the grass is green on the other side, right? But in the case of heaven, we have no idea if that grass is going to be violet or blue. We don't know what kind of color it's going to be. But either way, we know we have a hope that transcends everything we face in this life. Every sort of brokenness, every sort of broken heart we can face, every circumstance, we have a hope. Not just in heaven, but even for this life, even right here today. So let's make this a little bit more practical. This means we can entrust everything to God. Whether it's our finances, it can be our marriages, it can entrust our children to God. Everything is within God's control, and we can trust Him to guide us. And so God knows each of us and all the doubts that we wrestle with. And just as Jesus calls Himself the Good Shepherd, God desires the very best for us as His sheep. And so in your prayers, this is kind of an opportunity to just be open and honest about your desires and the things that you're hoping to work out in your own life. If you're facing a stressful conflict or a tough month financially, those are moments where you get to call upon God and say, you know what, Lord, this is not mine, it's yours. I can lay this at your feet, and I trust you to make it work. I think you'll find yourself more content and more thankful. And I found that to be true in my life, and I hope it's the same for you. Verses 3 and 4. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Again, when I hear these words, it kind of brings to mind of what I would call course correcting. And so what about the things, when things between you and God aren't exactly at an all-time high? When anyone admit that they've had some low moments? I've had some low moments. Even this week, we've all had them. Maybe an old temptation kind of surfaced and you realize that it got the better of you this time. And I don't want to make light of sin. God takes it very seriously, and I think we should take it very seriously as well. But our prayers need to have time for confession. Our prayers need to have time where we just admit, you know what, Lord, I dropped the ball there. I need you to forgive me, and I need you to help me ask for forgiveness. To help us understand this better, I want you to think back to a time when you first learned how to ride a bike. If your father was at all like mine, he had a very sweet moment where he sat me down on a curb, and he told me, as I was riding my bike, he said, you know, there are some places I don't want you to ride, and that includes the road. And my dad, being the wonderful guy that he was, he said, now what would happen if you were to ride on the road and a car hit you? And in my 7-year-old mind, I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I don't want to hardly imagine that. But in the same way that a car would just absolutely obliterate a 7-year-old, God forbid that ever happens, in the same way that that would happen to me, our sins can derail our lives so quickly. And the things, it's not just something we're just going to walk away from, right? It's something that's going to cripple us. I think God takes it that seriously, not because he wants to be mean, he wants us to be these simple, obedient children. He wants us to be full of life. He wants us to experience a life that is full of joy. And so the sins that we have, the sins that we struggle with, I think those are opportunities where we get, again, just to confess them and be honest and open about what we struggle with. When we sin, God is disappointed, where he's more scared than anything else. And he wants us to confess what we did and to avoid it next time. And so in verse 5, in Psalm 23, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. I would say of all the verses from Psalm 23, this is probably the most fuzzy as it relates to prayer. I wrestled with this verse, but it dawned on me that God wants us to be proactive with our prayers. It kind of piggybacks off of verses 3 and 4. And when we need course correction, God offers a path where we can claim actual victory over our past mistakes. And so this includes daily victory over habitual sins, includes victory in our roles as spouses, as family, or as friends, and victory in the face of adversity. I want you to, again, just think back to Jeremy Lanphier, okay? While his prayer revival did not fix all the problems America faced, even very shortly, they faced the Civil War. Just because that happened did not mean that it was any less powerful in those moments. If Lanphier had not been faithful to pray, not been faithful to lead and to be faithful in his prayer life, we don't know that anyone would have gotten saved. I believe that the Lord would have risen other leaders, sure. But even then, 2 million people is a very tremendous thing. It's something worth celebrating. And so in our own lives, when we have that course correction, when we are then brought to a place where we are empowered and equipped for his purposes, that prayer is now something that can be used for God's glory. We may face the same types of doubt that Lanphier might have faced. He might have seen how even just a few years later, did those prayer meetings really mean anything? We may have experienced many victories, and yet as life has its way, we experience hard times again. But it's in those seasons of life where we have to pray and ask God for a fresh indwelling of his Spirit and ask him to show us victory. Closing up Psalm 23, verse 6. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David once again offers a great perspective of God, where we can rest in the knowledge that the God we love and the God who loves us isn't going to stop all of a sudden. And so the idea here is that it's a bountiful blessing. Again, if we go through our lives and we're not convinced that anyone loves us, maybe here on earth, we know there's at least one person who's our biggest cheerleader, who's our biggest supporter, always there, always loving, always looking for our good and looking to see our lives lifted up. And so when we devote ourselves to prayer, when we love God and love others like Jesus did, we know that God deems us worthy of a place for him for all eternity. The second scripture, you might have guessed it already, is the Lord's Prayer. It's Matthew 6, verses 9 through 13. That entire passage there is verses 5 through 15. I'd love for you guys to read that. There's lots of good stuff there, but today I'm just going to focus on verses 9 through 13. And so Jesus instructing his disciples, he says, "This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever." Now again, I'm going to breeze through these pretty quickly, but I think there's another formula that Jesus offers here that I think is worth following. And I think it's honestly a lot much more straightforward than Psalm 23. But just simply going right from the beginning, our Father in heaven, this kind of idea that we can call upon God as our Father. It's not just, he's not this far off being that just floats up in heaven looking down on us with wrath. No, he's our Father. And so the idea is we can connect with him relationally. We can call him Dad, call him Daddy, call him Abba, Father. Thank him for the relationship that you have with him. He's made himself accessible to us. The second one is, hallowed be your name. Again, holy is your name. Worship him. So what are his names, his attributes? Those are times in your prayer you get to tell him what you appreciate about him. The third is, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Again, this is just an opportunity to pray God's agenda first. Oftentimes when we start our prayer, we tell him how many issues we have, and we don't hardly take the time to listen to what he has to say. Prayer is very much a two-way conversation, and sometimes it's just where we need to listen to him respectfully. And so we need to pray God's agenda, pray for the lost, pray for guidance in the people in authority in our communities, in our government, pray for our families, our workplace, pray for our heart to look more and more like his. Again, I think if we do that, we'll see a lot of good come from that. The fourth is, give us today our daily bread, and it's just an opportunity again to depend on him for everything. Ask God what you want and need, and trust him to provide an answer. Again, so often in prayer we think maybe the issues and concerns we have are just not worth God's time. That's not true. It's not true at all. If someone's ever told you that, you've been told a lie. God cares about every single thing. I love the scene in Bruce Almighty where Jim Carrey gets to become God for a few days, and he gets these emails that just seem to never end. He's sitting there, and like 5 seconds later, he's like 5 million more. He's like, goodness, how do you keep up with this? But again, God sees every single one of those, and he sees them as an opportunity to speak into our lives. And it doesn't always mean he's going to answer the way that we want him to, right? But at least he cares, and he addresses them. The fifth, forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. This is simply an opportunity to get your heart right. Get your heart right with God and with people. This is a time where you get to ask God to check your heart and your motives. And in those moments, you need to receive his forgiveness, right any conflicts you have with others. It's that simple. The sixth, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. This is something we often shy away from in churches, where we don't want to talk about the spiritual warfare, the spiritual dynamic of what we face in day-to-day life. But it's simply an opportunity to engage in spiritual warfare or prepare for war. Take your stand against the enemy, draw your line in the sand, and fight a good fight of faith. Every lie that the enemy has told you should be replaced with the truth of God's word. Number 7, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Again, that's often something that gets left out of this passage. But I think it's just an opportunity for us to remember God's ability to fulfill what he said he's going to do in our lives. And that's an opportunity to express faith in his ability. It's not a reminder for God. God doesn't need to remember how good he is. We're the ones who need the reminder. And so again, in our prayer, we need to just remind ourselves who God is and what he can do in our lives. And so I realize that's a lot of heady information. I know you guys have been very good at sticking with me through that. But I want to kind of close in this time of more reflection and really telling you more about the why. And so really as we see all these things, we see this desire for prayer, we see this relational intimacy that David writes about in his song. We see the kind of relationship and the simplicity that Jesus looks at when he looks at prayer. All of this isn't just something that we need to do so it makes us look good to the outside world, right? This is something that helps us have communion with God, helps us to be encouraged by the Lord himself. and also that we would be prepared for whatever lays ahead of us this week. If we want to have a revolution of love, what that would look like. So often we, again, just want to act without asking. We want to act without praying. But I think our world needs us to just take a few moments sometimes. The world's not going to get much worse, I promise you, in just 20 minutes, or 5 minutes, or 5 seconds. So often when we look through our lives and we see a need just to act. And I want to challenge you, that need is still there. We do need to act. But more often I think we need to also pause and be reflective about what we're going to say. Be reflective about the kind of person we're going to be. Check our own heart. Get our heart right before God. Whether you subscribe to the values of Psalm 23 or directly from the Lord's Prayer, I believe God is calling us to deepen our roots and to stay true, to stay gold to Him. I think the more and more as we look into our world and in these next few weeks, I think we're going to see that God wants us to go deeper in our prayers. I need that. Even as a pastor, I don't mind admitting that to you. I struggle with prayer. It can sometimes just feel like I'm just talking. But oftentimes, I realize that prayer is also something that's going to get me through my day. I don't know about you, but if I don't have my time with the Lord, I am a different person, almost. I'm very irritable and I'm impatient. All those things. But even more than that, when I don't pray, I don't see people in the way that they need to be seen. Amen? I see people more as inconveniences. I see people more as broken stories that I just don't want to mess with, right? I know I'm really looking into a really good pastor's heart here, but that's just the truth. It's the unfiltered truth for you. But I think the more that we allow God to speak to us in prayer and also allow Him to give us direction, give us purpose, I think we'll see the value of prayer. And so, I know it's a little bit early, but I'm going to go ahead and pray for us. If you would bow your head with me. Father, we thank you so much for your love. We thank you again for your word and the encouragement that it brings. Lord, we simply thank you for prayer. God, it's not a gift that you had to give. It's a gift that you wanted to give. Lord, we thank you that you're not just some God floating up there that's inaccessible to us, Lord. Lord, I thank you for everyone in this room. And Lord, as we deepen our roots, as we stay true to you and what you've called us to do, the kind of people you need us to be, Lord, would you show us how to pray? Lord, help us to see the value of seeing you as our Father, to see you as a person that can actually forgive us and help us to move back on track with you. Lord, our world needs us. As much as we are troubled by it and disturbed by it, Lord, we believe that your Spirit can move us in such a way that this world would look more like you. And so God, our desire, our prayer is simply that you would make us more like you first. And that as we go about this week and even throughout the next few weeks, Lord, as we continue on this revolution, what it looks like to be revolutionaries for you, God, just make us more like you. Give us a love that can only come from you. Lord, when we are so tired, when we are so exhausted, we are at the end of who we are, the end of our strength, Lord, we believe that you can be our strength through prayer. We believe that you can give us a fresh indwelling of your Spirit. That we would not just love by words, but truly by action. And so, God, I thank you again for these people. They're very precious to you and precious to me. And I thank you for them. Be with us all now until we come together again. And we ask this all in your name. Amen.